This is the Coaching Leader Podcast, a resource for modern, busy people leaders like you who know that just directing people simply does not work in the long run. We provide focused skill practice and the relevant thinking models, so you will ask better questions and make your team shine. Freshly served to you by IntelliCoach.org from hot and spicy Singapore.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of the Coaching Leader Podcast. So today is the second episode of a two-part episode where we talk about solving. And the first episode was about why we love solving. And yes, we love it very much. And this episode is really about what are the impacts when we solve constantly, what might happen. So, and there are a couple of things that I want to share with you today. And the first very obvious one is when we as a leader keep solving other people's issues, especially our team members' problems, challenges, and we advise them right away before asking anything, we create a dependency. It's very simple. Our people become dependent on us over time. This is interesting because as a leader, it's quite understood, and you know that one of your overarching tasks is to create a team that performs on their own. But if we jump in all the time, we create a dependency. We become sort of the one person who needs to be passed by before any new big critical thing can be implemented. And that leads to the second thing, learning. People really don't learn that much when you give them a solution on a silver plate. And many of you have probably been studying, or you remember your school days, when you just sit back and you're getting solutions, in quotes, or being given ideas by a teacher or a lecturer or a professor. Do you think a lot during those times? Mostly not. I can only tell how it was for me. Most of the times I just switch off. I might take notes, maybe not even generative notes, maybe just verbatim notes. And I don't think, I just absorb and I copy. And that's exactly what happens usually when we give advice and the other person does not do anything but accept it. People don't learn that way. Okay, maybe they do learn something. They learn that you are the one as the leader who gives them all the advice and all the solutions that they then have to execute. Yeah, people don't learn when they don't think. People must really think through and reflect. And that's why in coaching, even when we have coached, it's actually very useful at the end of a conversation to ask, what do you take away? I always ask this question, and when I don't ask it, when I forget, I can see the impact. Less of the thing happens. Very often the magic of a coaching conversation happens when this question is asked. And you can ask that in many ways during a coaching conversation. For example, in the middle, you can ask, what have you realized so far in this conversation? And at the very end, what's the 1-2 things you take away? You don't have to ask them, what did you learn? That sounds paternalistic. But you can ask them really to reflect, find your own way, and don't become a bottleneck. Then the third thing after dependency and learning is ownership. And that's an interesting one because imagine as a leader, you give advice to somebody, the person in front of you nods, and they say, thank you, that was really helpful. I like that. Even if you don't show it, of course you're proud and it feels fulfilling. It feels like you're doing your job well. But whose solution is it? It's now yours, of course. It's the leader's solution. And if your team member now goes out and they apply what you said, they talk to this one person in a certain way, or they implement their project in a certain way, if it works, then it's not because of their own idea. It's because, of course, their boss gave it to them, and that might be good enough, but it's hardly super exciting for them to share their fame. And if it doesn't work, will they take ownership? Well, they might just come back to you and tell you, look, boss, I've tried it, it doesn't work. And in that moment, you might think, oh, what's wrong with this person? It was such a good idea. I would have made that work easily. Or you might say, what a pity. Now I have to meet that person again for half an hour and explain it all over again. Or I have to add more detail to it. I have to explain it better. Maybe I explained it not well enough. But in the end, what happens usually when you advise, what happens usually is that our people will translate it and will try to apply it. But because it is not something that they develop themselves, there are some missing pieces and they might just ask again. So advising very often leads to more advising. And of course, consultants like that, consultants and advisors, because that gives us more work, right, as consultants. Because, our clients will always happily come back to us, or not happily. It makes us happy as consultants, but our clients will come back to us and ask us for more advice. Now, they will tell you, so this didn't work, or we are stuck here. Tell me more. What should I do? And in that case, you gladly help. But in the day-to-day work as a leader, that can really backfire because it costs you a lot of time. So on the one hand, it gives you pride and fulfillment to solve one question and challenge after another, but it leads to your team members coming back to you again and again, asking for more detailed advice on how to master that next challenge. When once a team member developed a solution on their own, their asking for advice to you might be very different because they are asking from a point of ownership. They know it's their solution. They are then usually a lot more resourceful too. And all you can do is check in and guide a little bit. So ownership is a big deal. So the third thing is, up to now, we sort of assume that our solution is actually a good one, but what if it's actually not? So let's talk for a moment about the quality of our solution. Because very likely, you are basing whatever you say in that moment on incomplete information. If your team member runs up to you, to your desk while you're busily typing away on an email to your own boss and they ask you on how to proceed on a certain detail in their project, you think for a moment, you map, that's what we know from the last episode, you map what you hear. Of course, you have an idea and you share it with them. But are you really the one sitting at your direct report's desk 100% of the time? Have you fully read 100% of the project documentation? Are you fully across all the emails sent in the past few weeks? Do you know the views of all the project members? So usually, obviously, no. And the interesting thing is we know who's in the best position to make a sound judgment. And that is the person who's dealing with the project, which is the team member. So what makes us in this moment to dispense with advice? Again, it's that certainty that we have as leaders. We learned to make judgments under uncertainty, but that may lead us in this moment to give premature advice that is based on naturally incomplete information. So it's a judgment call, and we're not often aware of the implication of it. So it is quite possible that your solution fits, that it happens to fit, but it is also very likely that your solution does not fit the actual details, that there is a lot more going on, nuances between people dynamics, functional details even. So it is almost a fact that at any point in time you have incomplete information, and in some way it's a little bit preposterous to presume that just from one or two questions from a team member, you automatically know exactly what is most likely working. Just because you are a leader doesn't automatically mean you have the detail that you might need to make a sound judgment. It is a lot more useful in that case, given the incomplete information, to help your team member think things through and to help them understand what they might have to consider given their existing knowledge, to help them on the right path. And even more, so the one thing we said is we are likely to have incomplete information. The other thing is, even more likely it is that your solution then solves the wrong problem in the first place. So when professional knowledge workers and the people you are hiring and you have hired are probably very highly skilled. When they come to you and there's a challenge that they have, it is very rarely a matter of knowledge and missing information. If it is, then we don't need to coach. That is very clear. If it is a black and white knowledge piece, then you give it to them, of course. If there's some piece of knowledge that they need, which only you have because of your insight, because of your own peer network as a leader, then give it to them. But if somebody comes to you and they should have the knowledge, but still something is making them hesitant, something else might help more. Because very likely the people in front of you, when they have struggles, they technically know what to do. Yet they are unwilling to make a decision on their own because of some fear, some hesitation, some insecurity. So very often what happens is, for example, if your team member comes to you and they ask you, I have this real struggle with this one client who we've been bringing aboard last month. Seriously, this person, every time I talk to them on the phone, they scream at me after 2 or 3 minutes. And in anger, they are really a choleric. I have no idea how to handle that. And you as a leader in that moment, you think, you've been in sales. You've had customers like this. You know how to handle it. There's a plan. There's a flow chart for that. What's the problem? You've learned that. There's exactly a guide for how to handle that. And what you do then is, of course, you dispense with that knowledge. You say, this is exactly how in this situation you should behave. And you think by yourself, why isn't this person applying the process? What is wrong? So you tell them exactly how they should behave in this situation, and because you know it has worked with you in the past. And then maybe a week later, after they thanked you, maybe a week later you meet them again and you ask them, so how did the next conversations with that client go? And your team member just looks at you and tells you, I actually haven't had a conversation yet with them. And you wonder, okay, I thought you were about to talk to them 2 days after our conversation. What happened? And they look at you and say, I postponed it. I think I need a bit more preparation for that. And that should be a marker for you as a leader when you hear things like this. Because that means your solution, your process flow has not helped at all. It has not fundamentally addressed the actual challenge that this person has. So for that, there's a question that is really powerful if somebody comes to you and you believe that knowledge might not be the real issue. You should always have this question in your toolkit that says, what's the real challenge here for you? And that is not something that is judgmental. It is to understand from the person where their real blockage is. And that it can be an extremely useful question to open up what blocks a person from performing. And it is exactly understanding that detail. What is it? What's the exact challenge that the person has? That if we find out about it and unblock that, this is where coaching speeds up performance. Yes, it might feel slow in that moment, but it speeds up someone else's progress because it directly addresses the actual challenge that somebody has. But let's assume for a moment that our solution is actually quite okay. But what we often do is let's say, for example, you're sitting down with a friend and they share with you the struggle that they have with their mother-in-law, for example, and you tell them, look, how about you just talk to them more slowly, or you bring her some flowers. And the answer is, but she's always so unreasonable. She's always giving me headaches, and she's questioning me on the smallest things. And then your mind, okay, then then why haven't you talked to your father-in-law? Maybe he has an idea. And the other person says, that hasn't worked either. He's always quiet and sitting in the corner drinking his beer. And we have these kind of conversations all the time. Translate that to work. Someone asks us for advice and we give them solution after solution after solution, and nothing lands. So it's like throwing spaghetti on a wall. Yes, it makes it a little bit colorful, but nothing really sticks. And when we are in this kind of process and we are stuck and we want to look for solution after solution in our experience, we get frustrated too. Because we want to add value. We want to desperately add value. But in this moment, we are even less helpful because we don't even notice that the other person is not listening. Our solutions just pearl off like water droplets. So this should be a clear signal to you that your solutioning is not useful to them. And when it comes to personal relationships, after having been in a company for more than a few years, everybody knows technically how they should behave. So is it really a piece of knowledge? People know what to do. And we can believe in them. We can activate our coaching mindset and believe in their knowledge that they should find their own way. Another way to express that is that we often just try to add too much value. And Marshall Goldsmith, who's a very good coach, calls this one of the very cardinal sins that leaders have. I just want to read a short paragraph here from a blog article of his that explains it quite well. So imagine an energetic, enthusiastic employee comes into your office with an idea. She excitedly shares the idea with you. You think it's a great idea. But instead of saying, great idea, you say, that's a nice idea. Why don't you add this to it? So when we do this, what does it do? It deflates her enthusiasm. It dampens her commitment. So while the quality of the idea might go up 5%, her commitment to execute it may go down 50%. That's because it's no longer her idea, it's now your idea. So that's the danger of adding too much value. While technically useful from your own mind to make your team member's idea perfect, it reduces ownership. It comes back to ownership. So we've already had 4 ideas so far. The dependency that we create, the learning that we prevent, the ownership that we reduce, and the solution itself might not be of good quality. And our solution might be a symptom of us just adding too much value, which reduces the impact too. So there's one more thing. There's just one more thing. One further downside of solving for others that I want to mention here. When you, upon a question of a team member or a team even, give them your first idea right away, you basically set an anchor with them. And that's interesting. It doesn't really matter how you say it, because you might think for yourself, I shouldn't tell them right now what they should do. I will just give them a suggestion. And you open your mouth and you say, look, folks, I have an idea, but you don't have to implement it because this might not be working anyway, but this is what I would do, what I personally would do in this moment. So what happens in your team members' minds right now? So they hear you say what you would have done in that moment. Is it really a suggestion that they hear? Not really. It is an implicit advice. Because very often as leaders, we forget, however casual our relationship is with our team members, we forget the impact of the formal part of our leader role. Our people are dependent on us. Performance reviews, pay. So in that moment, when we give a well-meant, soft suggestion, it's not a suggestion. It is an idea that their own ideas now have to measure up against. So when we say, this is just a suggestion that I would like to make, you don't have to listen. What people hear is, you should probably do this. And after all, it's because when your team members hear you give your suggestion, they make a very rational set of choices in their mind. They will say, for example, is it worth now disagreeing with my boss who probably thinks their idea is great? Do I need to expose him or her and potentially risk an argument that I cannot win anyway? Is it worth bringing my own idea up now for the danger of exposing some some minor flaws in my boss's thinking? Or is my idea really good enough? I need more time to think it through. And after all, whatever. If something goes wrong, I can just always say it was my boss's idea. So better just agreeing right away for the sake of peace. This is not worth fighting for. So, and this is what might happen in somebody else's mind when they hear your suggestion. And will they fully embrace creative thinking in that moment again? No, because we have already provided them with an idea of what a good solution might be like. You've already given them some idea. And that reduces the potential range of solutions there are. There are really no small things when it comes to what you say as a leader. And that's quite a universal truth that I keep sharing as well. So in summary, the 6 points that I made are your solutions for others automatically reinforce a dependency on you. You reinforce yourself as a bottleneck and you contribute to yourself being even busier. Because after all, you created this team to have partners who are able to come up with great solutions. You prevent learning by giving them advice because learning and ownership happens when people think their own way through a problem or a challenge. So the third thing is, you reduce that ownership dramatically because it is those aha moments where people are enthusiastic, where they build motivation towards their own path. And your solution might not really be a good one because of a lack of information. Maybe because you don't even understand the actual challenge, because you haven't figured out really what the person is holding back. Is knowledge really what they need? Are they so unresourceful, not sure that word exists, to not find their own way towards the information they need? And lastly, you automatically set an anchor. If you come with your solution first, at least. You make it hard for people to now disagree with you. If there's no solution in the room first, there's nothing to disagree with. So people are usually freer to provide more or wider solutions that you might even find quite surprising. So what is a potential way out? And I want to suggest again a small experiment, a very simple thing. Coming back to the nice book, The Coaching Habit, let's activate a little bit of coach-like behavior and figure out when someone asks you for advice. Should the first thing that comes out of my mouth be an advice itself? Or should it be a coaching question or just a question that shows interest and a belief that this person can figure something out and has ideas, valuable ideas on their own? Because, don't forget, your feeling of slowness in this moment when you ask questions is treacherous. The speed of coaching is hidden. It's a second order effect. The speed is when this team member is excited about something they figured out. They run away, they work it through, and they don't ask you all the time for more details about your solution. So this is what I would like you to experiment. Simply reorder the elements in your conversation. You don't have to ask anything different because very likely very often at the end of a meeting, you ask, what would you think? What would you have done? Now you know my solution, but what would be your idea? Just simply pull this ahead. Pull this ahead to the beginning. And it's a very simple technique that makes you very coach-like in behavior without even asking any different powerful question. So I hope this was useful. A little bit longer today. I hope this was a useful exploration in what makes us naturally solve and what could be the downsides, what could be the impacts to it. All the best in trying small and big experiments. And if you have any questions on that, so please find me and ask them. I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn with you. Because frankly, every little coaching conversation is different, and I'm learning with every coaching conversation, and I'm learning with everybody who I'm teaching how to coach. So I really look forward to hearing from you. All the best, and talk to you again in the next episode. Bye.
You have been listening to the Coaching Leader Podcast, your resource to activate strengths and coaching skills in leaders. Head over to IntelliCoach.org to check out our blog and offers. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for tuning in.
Hello again. Thanks for sticking around a little bit longer. I feel like this part of the podcast is sort of the after party. It's like you have the official presentation done, and then people get up and mingle, and you talk casually. And it's strange because in the end it's not this. It's similar. Why would it feel any different? But maybe it's just a mindset thing. It feels different to me. It feels more casual, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure why this effect exists. So I designed it as an experiment myself, and see, I'm also experimenting. And I find that strangely enough, it leads me to talk about different things that might be useful, might be not useful. So, and because this is really an unedited part of the podcast, I ask for your forgiveness. And if you don't like it, just don't listen to it. So I want to discuss some obvious detail in my approach of running this podcast here, because I'm promoting coaching, which means not dispensing automatically with advice and asking others to come up with their own ideas. And I truly believe that for the audience of this podcast, this absolutely applies. Yeah, so that people can find their own way to coach, and they can make their own impact. Yet what I'm doing here is mostly advising. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm giving solutions, I'm giving frameworks, I'm telling people how things, in my personal view, work, and what they could try. So wouldn't you say that's a contradiction? You're contradicting yourself here, Mike, because you think people should coach and all you do is advising. And in a way, yeah, I think I do. And the way I explain it myself, my excuses, is because simply I'm alone here. And I would find it extremely strange and paradoxical if I started coaching myself. I've actually explored that. So in the beginning, when it was extremely uncomfortable, just sitting here and talking into a mic, I was wondering, what could I do? What could I do to make this more comfortable? I've drawn up the mind maps, as I said. I've even put a picture of a random person that I found on Google in front of me, just to give myself to experiment with trying to speak to somebody. But not anymore. That picture is gone. Doesn't make any difference. So what I found is just the experience, or the repetition, the quantity that led to a bit more quality in the sense of my comfort. So yes, and when you picked up this discrepancy, I would say, or inconsistency in my messaging, you're completely right. So in the current format of this podcast, it is advising predominantly, and my curiosity is really how people implement it, and it's sort of a reflection of a kind of coaching as well that is quite down to earth and typical in the workplace. Because very often vanilla coaching, I would say, is that coaches are measured not ever to share or to show that they guide the thinking towards a solution of a client, that they guide the client to a certain solution, and client coaches are rated in that manner. It's part of a checklist. When you become an ICF accredited coach, you're being checked against, and people pick up these nuances. When you have an idea about where someone should go, that gives you a negative mark. It's that simple. But when we're on the workplace, we are not a pure coach. We are a leader at the same time. In that case, coaching becomes a part of the toolkit. And it's as important, I would say, as solving for others. And also mentoring, for example, guiding. So the very important message that I want to bring home again and again and again to listeners of this podcast, and this podcast is meant for people, leaders like you, is that don't go away thinking now every conversation can be solved or can be handled with pure coaching. You will frustrate the hell out of the people around you. Right? If somebody comes to you at a water cooler and asks you, Mike, where's the file cabinet? Where are the files for the project meeting last week? And you turn around to them and you look at them and you ask, what would be the positive impact if you knew that? I think people will probably want to slap you right in the face. There are situations where there is no need for coaching. Yeah, so in many times as leaders, we know more than other people do. And that is explicit, formal, black and white facts. And there are implicit approaches that you should dispense to other people as a mentor. So none of these are unimportant. They are equally important. But coaching as a style is useful because it helps us to create long-term ownership in other people in a very powerful way. And so what I mean to say is, I'm rambling here, yeah? What I mean to say is that when we face a situation as a leader, somebody comes to us, asks us for advice, and it's not really clear whether the solution is black and white knowledge or whether there's something else. We have a choice to make. Yeah, we can advise, tell them what they should do, and then ask them, now that you know that, how will you proceed? What are you going to do with the advice? I see you're excited. I noticed that. So how are you going to progress with that? So and then our coaching in that moment focuses purely on accountability. While I would say what I would call ICF coaching, pure vanilla coaching, is really about not assuming that my solution as a coach has any role to play. I'm simply a facilitator of someone else's thought. But we rarely are in that position as a leader, because us being a coach is one role of many that we play in relation to the people that we lead. And I might say now, coming back to the original idea why I share this is, I see my role here in this podcast very likely as an advisor first, and it's a bit strange to admit that. Now I'm looking forward to, in the future on this podcast, to actually coach, because it's tough to only talk about something and never do it. Yeah, so for that I want to find ways to get this podcast off the ground first. It's not there yet, but I really want to find ways to coach on that podcast. But most of the episodes are designed specifically to provide advice, because that's the role that I chose to play. And frankly, also because I've gained a lot of black and white, maybe not as black and white, but very solid knowledge over the past few years that is extremely helpful to people. It's learnings that I made, that I accumulated. And why would you need to go through all that yourself? Why would you need to do the same mistakes that I made? Yeah, I mean, one good thing is, we all learn. It's a good thing to learn from mistakes, but it's even better to learn from someone else's mistakes. So why not learn from my mistakes and from my learnings? So I really wanted to use that as an opportunity to explain why I chose to do it this way. This contradiction that you obviously noticed. If you paid attention, you noticed it. He's talking about coaching, but he's advising nonstop. So here I'm telling you, this is really a reflection of reality for a leader as coach. We advise, we coach, we flip. It is situational. So I feel it's very realistic. And especially for those of you who listen and want to integrate coaching in your work. You're not an executive coach who who meets their people once every few months and is disconnected really from their functional work. No, it's not the case. Yeah. So I hope this little excursion was a bit useful in explaining a bit on the approach I take. So there's a lot more interesting things to come in the next podcast, and look forward to talking to you then. Bye.